Hello and welcome to Views on News. I am Jawad. In today's program, we are going to take up for discussion two very important developments. The first one that relates to the Pakistani authorities and the IMF reaching a staff level agreement for the release of the new tranche under the $3 billion standby arrangement. And the second relates to the important meeting between US President Joe Biden and Chinese President Xi Jinping. This particular interaction, interestingly, lasted for 4 hours. So let's begin with the first one. We already know that Pakistani authorities and the IMF reached a $3 billion a 9-month standby arrangement earlier in July, and an IMF review mission was here in Pakistan that held negotiations for almost 2 weeks with Pakistani authorities in order to review the economic performance in the first quarter of this fiscal year. We saw positive statements, and those statements which were appreciative of the efforts and the measures which were taken by the Pakistani authorities for the economic stabilization, keeping itself on track to that very particular standby arrangement that was reached with the IMF earlier. Statements such as that came from IMF chief herself, Ms. Kristalina Georgieva, and also the review mission chief, Mr. Nathan Porter. Likewise, gratitude was also expressed by caretaker Prime Minister Mr. Anwarul Haqqan for IMF's steadfast support for Pakistan's economic stabilization. Likewise, we have also seen previously, we have seen a continuous bullish trend at Pakistan Stock Exchange. After this particular staff level agreement has been reached between Pakistani authorities and the IMF, today there was also a rally at the Pakistan Stock Exchange with KSE up 716.96 points, closing at 57,397.02. Likewise, there was an appreciation in the value of Pakistani rupee against the dollar. 76 paisas increased, and according to the State Bank of Pakistan, Pakistani rupee closed at 287.38 today. Let me quickly bring in our panelists to discuss these important developments on the economic front. We are honored to have been joined on Skype by Dr. Khaqan Najeeb. He's senior economist, also has served as former advisor at the Ministry of Finance. Dr. Khaqan, thank you very much for your time, for being with us on Views on News tonight. Really appreciate that. How do you look at this particular development? Now this staff level agreement has been reached between Pakistani authorities and the IMF. How crucial it was, and what exactly the efforts and the measures do you think Pakistani authorities had to put in order to stay on the track of this particular SBA and getting these negotiations in particular successful that led to reaching to this agreement?
Jawad, you and I have spoken on this before, and I've always maintained that it's important for Pakistan to be in an IMF program and then stick it out. Pakistan's history of not sticking to an IMF program has been, checkered at best. So it's crucial that we stay with the standby arrangement. Jawad, this is a bridging facility for Pakistan to pass the time of an electoral cycle that we are going through. The program ends somewhere early April. This was Pakistan's first review. It's very satisfying to note that the first 3 months, the quarterly targets were largely met. IMF arrived on 2nd of November as scheduled. The targets in the fiscal area, in the energy sector, in the external area, and lastly on the monetary side were all well within the framework that was agreed with the IMF. The reason this is more important at this time is that Pakistan's reserves still remain at an uncomfortable level of $7.4 billion as I speak with you, which covers about 1.5 months of Pakistan's imports. That's not a comfortable position, and our inflows have been subdued since July when the program got signed. So getting back on the first review, getting back to getting the $700 million, so paves the way for commercial financing, bilateral financing, multilateral financing, the Geneva flows. So, all in all, this is a good outcome. To get to this, we had to ensure that we ensured our fiscal consolidation, in which we showed a primary surplus and a deficit of 0.9% in the first quarter, which is actually less than the 1% we showed last year. We did a lot of expenditure cutting on the subsidies, on the PSDP, and on the other current expenditures. So that was all in all a good way to go. Some harsh measures. These are not hard measures, but these are harsh measures. I always, disassociate the hard ones, which are the more structural reforms in nature, and the harsh ones, which are like the pricing changes. We took the pricing changes and we reduced the flow of circular debt not only in the power sector but as well as in the gas sector.
Dr.
This does
Khaqan, when we
hurt.
talk about these price adjustments, I seek your pardon for the interjection over here. When we talk about the phenomenon of circular debt, when we try to understand the very dynamics of this particular phenomenon, separately when we talk about the gas sector as well as the power sector, what's other than this that is required in order to overcome this particular phenomenon of circular debt, other than or besides adjusting the prices and tariffs?
So that's really important question. The flow can be curtailed to a certain extent. The flow means the flow of circular debt buildup can be curtailed to a certain extent by taking the price to the NEPRA level, to the OGRA level. But then there are inefficiencies in the system, the T&D losses above what is prescribed by NEPRA. There are certain agreements with, that we have to sort out, then the inefficiencies in the system that we have to sort out. So to do all this, first, so we're trying to now sort out the cost side pressures. I think the real reform, of course, is to bring in the private sector management in the discourse, whether via complete privatization or through management outsourcing. Then the anti-theft movements have helped, but really we need to move on the power purchase agreements that we have, and we need to start reducing the incentives for captive power. We need to see what kind of debt reprofiling of the IPPs is needed. We need to remove the subsidies which are cross subsidizing various discos, so we really know where the higher losses are, and there the customers should be paying more so that they ask for efficiencies. Now, if you look at it in this scenario, in a similar vein, the gas sector, SUI companies have to be broken into smaller companies, have to move on to privatization. Then there is the tariff regime that has to improve both in the gas as well as in the power sector. We also need to start moving customers of high efficiency back into the gas sector, and people like you and me, which use gas at home, which is used inefficiently in our gas heaters, in our gas guzzling geysers, and the ovens, and move on to more electricity consumption there. So now we have started thinking about more structural issues. This is the next 5 year agenda if we really need to see the circular debt coming down as completely in terms of the flow. I think that is more of the
So
structural
Dr.
work
Khaqan,
that
please,
we will
if you
see.
hold your thought over here, please, once again, I seek your pardon for the interjection. When you talk of taking that particular shift from using gas in the households towards more of electricity, how is that possible? Or what measures are required for that to be done? Because if that shift is supposed to happen, the dependence more on electricity will definitely lead into more demand of electricity. So where that particular demand is going to be met?
So, Jawad, I'm really glad that you're trying to probe into this. So, let's look at it. One, our own production of gas has gone down from 4,000 mmCFD to only 2,900 mmCFD. So, we are importing gas to fulfill the requirement. That has gone up, but our exploration did not happen to the extent that it should have. Our production went down. are wells which were already there. After a while, they keep going down in terms of production, about 5 to 7% a year. So now we are not going to be able to actually supply you gas for 24 hours. So automatically, right now, even you will be moving into 8 hours of gas supply. So think about it. If you need to cook food beyond the 8 hours, you need to have stoves which work on electricity. So automatically, the supply constraint, and then couple it with the constraint that the gas prices will be at par with the electricity prices. We were giving gas much cheaper to the households. So what they were doing was that they were using, consuming much more comfortably the gas than the electricity. But the electricity will be available to you 24 hours. Why is that? We are surplus in electricity. We have about 42 to 43,000 megawatts of capacity that we have in the country. Our peak time demand doesn't go beyond 30,000. And in winters, our demand drops to 8,000 megawatts. People keep saying that this is a very unique phenomenon to Pakistan. That's actually not true. This phenomenon is there because we don't have in winters people using electricity to warm their houses, to clean their clothes with by warming water with electricity and cooking. If we were to shift that, they will have 24/7 electricity which can do all these things. This is going to happen in the future, maybe a couple of years down the road. A more proactive government which can take this step, use the gas that they save from the household to produce electricity cheaper in the country. That's the whole idea.
Okay, so what I'm trying to understand, once we try to shift from usage of gas in the household towards electricity, more of electricity, especially when we talk about the winter season. So as a consumer, I'm interested to understand if I'm getting an electricity bill of around 50,000 in a month of summer, right, using electricity, trying to cool my premises, using AC in particular and other related gadgets and devices. So if I have to warm my premises in the winter, of course, so I'm not using electricity, for that I'm using gas. Do you think that balance of tariffs or the gas and electricity bills happens to be the same, or is there any difference? Because
Right now, the
personally,
gas
I
you
think there is a
use.
difference when there is more of electricity bill in a summer month as compared to the gas bill in a winter month. So that extra bill that I'm paying in a summer month will naturally be going into my saving pocket in the winters.
Correct. But with the revision of the gas prices, which by the way have happened after 3.5 years, I think it was not something that we did prudently, that we held back gas price pass-throughs. What that does is that takes away the incentive of giving money to dig, new wells to produce new gas. So it's been a long time coming. So what we've now done is jacked up the prices. As you jack up the prices, that December, January, February bill of gas that you used to think was very low is going to be again not at least at par, but closer to what you would use electricity at home. So they are going to be in balance. So then you can make that choice. If the gas is not there, you can use your inverter air conditioners or the heaters, or the now you have these geysers which work on electricity. So that whole process is going to change because you're going to be re-incentivized because your gas bills are very close to what your bills are going to be if you use electricity. So that kind of reform is going to happen through incentivization. And once we move into privatization, you will see that there'll be incentives on, as you have seen in the telecom sector, the energy sector would start working very differently. I think that's what the future of Pakistan is.
Right.
I think this program is more macro stabilization The next program, if Pakistan chooses to take one, will be more fundamental in nature.
Right. Very quickly, unfortunately, we are short of time. This discussion is turning out to be really interesting. I just want to delve deeper into other aspects of it also. But pretty quickly, one last point as far as the taxation system here in Pakistan is concerned. What predominantly those sectors do you think are undertaxed or completely untaxed? And where should that be started from? As we have seen, quote unquote, as there were some statements by IMF chief Ms. Kristalina Georgieva regarding appreciation of the efforts put in by Pakistan. Now, she also deems that Pakistan should be collecting 15% tax to GDP. How is it doable? Where to start from in the immediate term?
One, enforcement of the taxes that are already levied on the different sectors. If we were to work on enforcement, I think our taxation would go up anywhere between 20 to 30%. Number two, bringing in four sectors: retail and wholesale, real estate, agriculture, income tax. If we were to start working on these, some of these fall within the provincial domain, but they also have repercussions on the federal taxation. So if we were to broad base, if we were to make compliance better, if we were to go through enforcement measures, and I always say this, that we need to appoint an FPR chairperson for the next 3 to 5 years, discuss with him or her how to move the FPR tax to GDP from 9-10% to 12 to 15%, technologically, sort out what needs to be done administratively, policy sphere, and structural sphere, and move ahead. Pakistan in the next 5 years should be looking at a lot of domestic resource mobilization without burdening the manufacturing sector of Pakistan, which we want to be doing better as we move into the future. But things like capital gains, death tax, inheritance tax are other taxes that Pakistan must also be thinking about.
Right, Dr. Khaqan Najeeb, thank you very much for being with us on Views on News tonight. We really appreciate that. Senior economist and served as former advisor at the Ministry of Finance. Really appreciate you taking time out for Views on News tonight. We really look forward to having another interaction with you sooner. Now, let's move to the second segment, a very significant and important meeting that was held between US President Mr. Joe Biden and Chinese President Mr. Xi Jinping, and this particular meeting was the first one in this particular year. Previously, they had a meeting, one-on-one meeting in Bali last year on the sidelines of G20. We'll try to delve deeper into as how this particular meeting was different from that was held in Bali. Now, this time around, on the very face of it, statements from both the sides with positive tone have come forward. Both the sides have pledged to re-engage and de-escalate the tensions. Both have also pledged to cooperate on major issues which include artificial intelligence and climate change in particular. The most significant outcome was both the sides also pledging to restore the military communications. Now, President Joe Biden saying, let me quote him, there are critical global challenges that demand our joint leadership, and today we made real progress, unquote. Likewise, President Xi Jinping said that the planet is big enough for the two countries to succeed. Let me quickly introduce our panelists to discuss this very important, significant meeting between the leaders of the two top economies of the world. For that, we are honored to have been joined in the studio by Dr. Adil Sultan. He is Dean, Faculty of Aerospace and Strategic Studies at University. Dr. Adil, thank you very much for your time, for being with us on the show tonight. Really appreciate that. Also in the studio, we are honored to have been joined by Mr. Khurram Shahzad. He is editor reporting Urdu News. Mr. Khurram, thank you very much for your time, also for being with us on the show tonight. Really appreciate that. Let me begin with you, Dr. Adil. How significant this meeting was, especially when you talk about in terms of timing and how badly at this particular point in history it was required.
This was a long-awaited engagement that both sides were looking for. It is useful. It has broken the ice, but will it lead to any meaningful progress? That we have to see, because it's premature to comment. There are structural differences on both sides. So major differences. The way United States has portrayed China now, and it has differences in many spheres like political, economic, military, technological, and all those issues. And those are serious issues that has been voiced as major concerns within a US think tank community or the academia or the policy makers. So it's a good start, but will it lead to any meaningful conclusion? We yet have to see that. One thing positive is at least the two leaders, they are now talking to each other, and hopefully this line of communication that has been opened, it will continue to be there in the foreseeable future.
Right, Mr. Khurram, what's your understanding about the significance as far as the timing of it is concerned?
I think this is very significant happening when the top two leaders of the world, Mr. Biden and Mr. Xi, meeting each other. This is a very good step. But having said that, we should look into the statements coming out from the meeting. They talked about Taiwan, they talked about North Korea and Russia cooperation, and then Mr. Biden termed Xi as a dictator. So, and the Chinese Foreign Office protested these remarks. So, I mean, we have to consider the intent of the US when they deal with China. I mean, at one end they are going to they say that they want to normalize the relation, and we hear good news that they have restored military communication, and then on the other hand we see comments about dictatorship in China. I think when you of course they are rivals, they are arch rivals, but still when you are meeting each other, you should refrain from such offensive remarks. So this is traditional US approach. Like at one time when they offer you friendship and they offer you contacts, at the same time they also make such remarks which offend you. So I don't see too much into this meeting. Yes, they talked about Taiwan, they talked about North Korea, Russia cooperation, and a few other things, military cooperation, of course. But I think we will have to wait more to see this relationship.
So when you try to equate the last meeting that was held between the two leaders and this time around, are there any similarities or are there any differences this time around? Well, if you weigh them both, which one do you think was more productive?
I think as we discussed this, I mean the Bali meeting was, I mean I was almost was same. The one difference is that between that meeting and between this meeting, the US Foreign Minister was in China. He visited China some time ago, and so they try to restore relations, and then this meeting came up and they talked about. So there is an advancement, but personally I'm not that hopeful. I mean we will have to see the happenings in future. We know that right now there is a crisis in the world, Israel crisis. We know what US position is there, and we know what China's position is there. China is not very forthcoming on that. They are very, what should I say, very careful.
Right. Okay. So your point is well taken. Now, if you would like to expand on this particular thing, then there must have been some points which would have definitely prompted the two sides to have such a meeting. We've seen in the recent past there was an escalation of tension between the two big rivals on many fronts. But there could have been something of a mutual concern which would have prompted these two to come again and talk about these pressing issues. What about the US presidential election? You have just mentioned that US is faced with global challenges which include two wars, the conflict of Russia with Ukraine, as well as now the recent conflict, the Israeli and Palestine conflict. So do you think there is an intention on the part of the US to not go into a confrontational mode when it comes to China in particular, just before the presidential election, which are due, which are pretty much around the corner in November next year?
Yes, I think we can take this positively. Biden might have been portraying this as a positive step and positive interaction, but we should also consider Chinese expansion in the world. China is expanding everywhere in the world. They are expanding in Asia, they are expanding in Africa, and their agenda is, agenda of development. Of course, they are creating hegemony around the world, but through development. While if you see,
these are two very different and contradictory terms if I try to understand them. The development on one side and hegemony on the other, and they are in a sort of an equation where both of them are complementing each other. How do you explain that?
I mean, I was about to mention the US way of hegemony. I mean, setting up themselves in the world, and actually these are two opposite things. China is expanding through development, through cooperation and winning the countries in Asia and Africa, and US is pressing countries. So US hegemony, is sort of very hard, and China's influence is, soft influence. So they are going with development, with financing, and with all the soft things, and with business, with trade. So I think US has realized that they should approach China, and they should.
So there is the likelihood of some positive outcome coming in the months to come or the weeks to come after this particular meeting.
Yes, we can hope that. We can hope that will happen, and but right now I'm concerned about it.
So what I understand, there is at least some rectification as far as the intention of the US administration at this point in time is concerned.
Yes, I think they have at least realized that they should approach China, and they
okay,
should
let me just
headways.
Once again go back to Dr. Adil. Dr. Adil, what's your understanding when we talk about those circumstances, events, incidents, or those particular concerns which would have prompted these two sides to come and have a meeting at this level?
If you are referring to the current episodes like Palestinian conflict, I don't think so, because this meeting or this engagement was in the offing for quite a long time. It took years for this to plan. United States and China have differences over several issues: economic, political, military. So economic, if you see, United States views China that it is aspiring to become a hegemon by spreading its economic influence by investment. Chinese have a different version. On political side, United States continues to pester China and continues to encourage smaller states like Taiwan and implicitly not accepting one China policy, but publicly stating that they support one China policy. Chinese do understand.
Why there is so much ambiguity when we talk about a US approach towards this particular problem?
It's not the only Taiwan issue. Political differences are there over several issues, because once there is a rival power or competitor, the differences are bound to happen, and the conflict of interests are bound to happen. And what we have seen in US national security strategy, their defense strategy or strategy papers, all the official documents, Russia has mostly been replaced by China. So their administration is now engrossed into this China-specific threat perception, and for that they have several justifications. So I was referring to those kind of differences. So they have political differences. Then they have military differences also. Lately you have seen the reports coming in the US think tanks over-projecting Chinese military potential, especially the nuclear component of that. And it's good that China and United States have recently agreed to start an arms control dialogue to understand each other's perspective. That's a good sign. But the United States sees China as a potential rival in the future. So while these two leaders, they have agreed to talk, and the institutions on both sides, they will continue to engage. But this conflict is natural because China is rising. United States cannot stop that. United States is a declining power. It fears that China might replace United States. What President Xi also said, we're not going to replace you. But that's not how United States sees China. So China, since it is rising, the conflict of interest is bound to happen, and this political, economic, and military differences would be there. And if they continue to talk to each other, probably we might be able to at least arrest that competition, military competition that is happening, or that is creating this instability in other regions, especially in South Asia or Asia Pacific region. That is a positive thing, that if they continue to remain engaged, some misperceptions could be addressed. But this competition is natural, and we should brace for this competition.
Right. So when we talk about the upcoming elections, US presidential elections that are due to be held in November next year, how important or crucial is it for the Biden administration when it comes to the bilateral relationship with China to avoid the confrontation at this point in time, given the fact that there are two major global conflicts already there where the US in one way or the other is involved, the Palestine-Israeli conflict and the Ukraine-Russia conflict?
Yeah, United States is in a difficult position. In Ukraine, it has got involved, and it's finding it difficult how to continue supporting that. Then the Palestine conflict also, and the pressures are there. But there's an interesting similarity in United States. Whenever the elections happen, they need to have some rival. At present, I think in United States, anti-China sentiments, they sell well. Like in India, anti-Pakistan sentiments sell well for the elections. Similarly, in United States election, anybody seeing going soft on China would not be seen as a very nationalist leader in United States. So I don't think so Biden has engaged with China because of the forthcoming elections. I think they are under pressure because they cannot stop China, they cannot arrest, while the United States has embroiled in so many conflicts and made so many commitments that it cannot possibly fulfill that. Whereas China has not made similar commitments. So China is going to take advantage of these conflicts and continue building, continue investing more. And the United States is apprehensive about that. So this engagement is probably to have better understanding of each other. And that's it. But in the elections, I don't think so. Any candidate in the United States would go soft on China and would possibly see the victory also.
So when we look at this particular meeting overall, the statements, the tone of those statements seems to be more of conciliatory this time around as compared to the previous one. Is that your understanding also? If yes, so specifically talking about the Chinese perspective, okay, so we can try to understand vis-a-vis the upcoming presidential election, whether they actually added a sort of pressure on the Biden administration to not go for the confrontation with the Chinese side. What has actually prompted the Chinese to go for that reconciliatory tone in this particular one?
Chinese are always looking for such kind of an engagement because they don't want to be distracted by military competition with the United States. That's not their path to success. Their path to success is not to get embroiled in a major military confrontation with anyone, even with smaller countries also, like India also. So continue to focus on economic growth, continue to spread their influence through economics. So that has been the trajectory.
So what I understand is economic concerns remain to be one of those top priorities of the Chinese side when it comes to forthcoming towards the US side. Is that so?
It is indeed, because China is a major beneficiary of globalization, which started post-Cold War era, where many countries thought that probably geopolitics or the real politics would take a back seat, and now interdependency, geoeconomics would take the front seat. But recent trends have shown probably that was a period in transition, a very relatively smaller period, and China is concerned that the way it saw itself as a potential global power by using its economic tools, and now it sees that there are some obstacles, and if we can engage with the United States and if we can restrain this military competition we can bring some semblance of stability at the global level. So it is in the Chinese interest, but the continued turmoil or conflicts in various regions, it's not in the Chinese interest. While United States military-industrial complex may earn from that, they may get short-term benefits. It's not in their interest also, but that's how United States economy has prospered. It's a war economy, so they continue to prosper those. That system is built on that. But it's not in the Chinese interest. And I think Chinese interest of engagement was primarily to bring some stability in great power relationship, that is China and United States.
Right, Mr. Khurram, now when we talk about this Israeli-Palestinian conflict in particular, the Chinese side categorically says that China always stands on the side of equity and justice and works actively for a ceasefire, cessation of hostilities, protection of civilians, and de-escalation. Also referring to the Ukraine-Russia conflict, they say that China's position on both the issues is clear and consistent. Now, specifically talking about the first one, Israeli-Palestinian conflict, I've seen Chinese side repeatedly asking and urging for a ceasefire. There have been strides at the United Nations Security Council for that matter, a number of resolutions being proposed there also. But there was, of course, veto by the US on a number of occasions. Is there any common ground where these two superpowers can actually think upon and try to de-escalate the situation in the Middle East vis-a-vis that Israeli-Palestinian conflict? If yes, what that could be primarily?
Frankly, I don't see that any of them will go too far to get this crisis solved. We know that US has a clear view on this. US is openly supporting Israel and backing Israel for all these atrocities which they are committing inside Gaza. And they have even at earlier stages they had even opposed the ceasefire, so they are totally backing Israel. And as far as China is concerned, China has, as you just mentioned, they have asked for ceasefire, but we have not seen any strong comments from China against Israel openly. So, and that has reason behind it, because of course China has its own interest in Middle East and with Israel. So that is why China has not gone far away on this issue. So I don't think that any of these two countries, these two superpowers of the world, will be helpful to solve this crisis at this stage. Maybe later on, if China changes its position and maybe go a bit more aggressive against Israel and against war, but I don't see it coming very soon.
Dr. Adil, your understanding regarding this, is there any sort of a common ground where both these powers can actually think about to go for a ceasefire or at least de-escalating the situation as far as Israeli-Palestinian conflict is concerned?
Looking at the past precedents, China has never been assertive in intervening other regions, even in South Asia also, between India and Pakistan conflict. It does advise the warring parties or the conflicting parties, but it doesn't assert itself. So it made its effort because it has responsibility, it's a major power, so it made an effort at the United Nations. But I don't think so it will go overboard to force ceasefire or push United States to force Israel for a ceasefire. They remain reluctant when it comes to conflict. They don't want to intervene other regions also, especially when the regional countries, the leadership of the regional countries, they are not very much interested
but
in
in the recent past, we've seen they've played a pivotal role, the mediation done by Chinese side when it comes to restoration of the diplomatic relations between Riyadh and Tehran. Both the sides coming onto the negotiating table also because of the Chinese endeavor. Now, if China can't persuade or can't convince the United States of America for the de-escalation of this particular conflict between Israel and Palestine, looking at this particular precedent which has already been set by China when it comes to the restoration of diplomatic relations between Riyadh and Tehran, can it pursue that particular line or direction when it comes to de-escalate the situation between Israel and Palestine?
It can, but it won't. Iran-Saudi rapprochement, as you would see, Chinese never made any statements. We all came to know once deal was done. So that's how the Chinese they work. They don't want to come in the media and start a process.
There was while the agreement was being signed,
Yeah.
the top the security officials of both Riyadh and Tehran were there with the top diplomat, Mr. Wang Yi, also there.
That's
also
what I'm
gave
saying. Once the agreement was reached, only then we came to know that China, in fact, brokered this deal. In Middle East right now, regional leaders are not much interested. The Arab leaders are not very much interested in stopping this war or conflict or pushing Israel for a ceasefire. So China has very limited leverage in that context. And another factor is if it doesn't hurt Chinese economic interest much, and on the other hand, it continues to bleed United States indirectly, it serves Chinese interests. They won't say, but as a realpolitik, I think if United States is engaged in Ukraine, it is engaged in Palestine, and if United States is unable to manage these conflicts, United States' reputation as a global power, it tarnishes. So who benefits from that? So Chinese, they probably would be reluctant to take any leadership role along with United States in intervening in Middle East. Unless there is vital economic interests are at stake.
So, Mr. Khurram, what's your understanding on this dimension? Can there be a leading role that could be adopted by the Chinese side other than the US, even if the US continues to back Israel?
I don't think they will go that openly. I mean, even if they would like to play a role, they would do it secretly, and they won't compromise on their stated positions, which I have already said that they have not gone openly against Israel. They have not criticized it openly because they have their own interests. They have relations.
We're asking for a ceasefire and cessation of hostilities. What does that depict? I mean, it asks for not going to war, right?
I mean, they are asking for ceasefire. That is what we know. I mean, many nations in the world are asking for ceasefire, but are you really pursuing for it? That is a question, and I don't see.
I mean,
China
the kind of endeavors at the United Nations Security Council have been made. I mean, Chinese position was pretty clear on that.
No, but still, they know that US will veto anything in the UNSC. So I think the Chinese are playing very well over there.
Okay, let's talk about the cooperation, the possible cooperation between US and China when it comes to artificial intelligence or the technological field. Where do you think both the countries stand right now? Or what is the possibility, and which of the sides do you think believe in healthy competition, cooperation, or confrontation? Out of these three, what do you think?
I think on this thing, US would like to have cooperation with China because they won't like that China go independently on AI and develop their own technologies and their own softwares which can disturb US in future. So they would like to have a cooperation. Same likewise.
Given this particular factor, they wouldn't want China to supersede them.
Exactly.
In this particular field. So in that sort of a scenario, so either they would go for competition or cooperation.
I think they will go for cooperation, and I think China will also seek cooperation because China is not that rich in technology as US is. So I think they would also like to have cooperation instead of confrontation.
Right, Dr. Adil, now the military communications have been restored. First of all, what does that mean and how significant it is going to be, and overall what does it depict?
Can I say a few words?
Please go
about
ahead.
it?
Regarding artificial intelligence.
AI,
please.
yes. United States wants from China restraint, because many Western reports, they have indicated that China probably has taken over United States. But it's a good debate, and this is one important issue that came out in the joint statement or communique, or the statements from both sides, because both sides are concerned if this competition goes unchecked, it would hurt interest of both sides. So that's why both countries are interested. Now, coming to your question about the military.
So what suits both of them? A collaboration, a healthy competition, or no cooperation at all and sort of a confrontation when it comes to artificial intelligence in particular?
Competition would be there because militarily there are several advantages that both sides would like to reap. But at the same time, both sides are wary of this. If AI goes unchecked, it could become problematic for them to restrain this competition. So that's why their worry is. So they want to have global norms agreed bilaterally and where other countries can also join in. On the military, quickly, I would say, both militaries now are operating around the globe. In Indo-Pacific region, Indian Ocean region, and there is a possibility of incidents at sea, and both countries also have space assets also. And again, it's in their interest because both have global reach and they don't want to get into confrontation, which none of them wanted. So they will continue to talk and they want to restore those communication links, the kind of hotline lines, in case something happens. So at least they should talk to each other before that incident can spiral into a major conflict.
So that shows that there would be less likelihood of any miscalculation or any mishappening after this restoration of military communication between the two sides.
Incidents could happen, but at least they would be communicated. There is a less possibility of misperception or miscommunication because in case something happens, so they would be talking to each other.
Unfortunately, we are short of time. I'll have to end the show over here. Dr. Adil Sultan, Dean, Faculty of Aerospace and Strategic Studies at Air University. Thank you very much for being with us on the show tonight. Really appreciate that. And also, Mr. Khurram Shahzad, editor reporting at Urdu News. Thank you very much for your time also for being with us on the show tonight. Really appreciate that. With that, we come to the end of today's episode. Thank you very much for being with us.